My name is Jaime Reynolds, 32 years old, and until yesterday I was a senior financial analyst at Morgan Stanley Capital. 10 years in, accounting specializing in regulatory compliance, and I never saw it coming. Brandon called me into his office that Tuesday afternoon, his smirk visible before I even sat down. The dismissal was swift. "We don't need incompetence dragging down the department," he said, the VP's son, so confident in his power. I nodded curtly and walked out, my face betraying nothing of the devastation inside. Little did he know, a federal audit was about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever faced workplace injustice like this. I earned my MBA in finance from Northwestern University with honors, then spent 6 years building a stellar reputation at Morgan Stanley Capital. My daily responsibilities included ensuring all financial reporting met compliance standards, analyzing market trends, and flagging potential risks. I took pride in my meticulous approach to documentation and my ability to spot irregularities before they became problems. My colleagues often joked that I could find a needle in a financial haystack, but that attention to detail was exactly what made me good at my job. The company had several key players you should know about. Elaine Parker, our chief financial officer, had been my mentor since I joined the firm. She recognized my potential early on and had guided my career path with wisdom and encouragement. William Carter served as our chief executive officer, a distant but respected figure who rarely interacted with employees below the executive level. Then there was Jeffrey Reynolds, vice president of finance and a major power player in the company. His leadership style was aggressive but effective, earning him both fear and respect throughout the organization. Everything changed when Jeffrey announced his son Brandon would be joining our department as the new manager. Brandon was 28 with minimal experience but maximum confidence. His resume included a business degree from a prestigious university and 2 years at a smaller financial firm, hardly qualifications to manage a team of seasoned professionals. My closest colleague, Sophia Martinez, immediately expressed concerns. "Nepotism never ends well," she whispered after the announcement meeting. "Just watch, he'll expect us all to bow down while he takes credit for our work." Taylor Johnson and Adam Cooper, other members of our team, were more optimistic, hoping fresh leadership might bring positive changes. The first warning signs appeared during my initial one-on-one meeting with Brandon. When I explained our preparation for quarterly reporting, his eyes glazed over. He interrupted my explanation about compliance protocols to ask about bottom-line improvements and efficiency cuts, buzzwords that showed a fundamental misunderstanding of our regulatory responsibilities. "These compliance procedures seem excessive," he commented, flipping through my carefully prepared audit files. "We should streamline these processes." "These procedures are mandated by federal regulations," I explained patiently. "They're not optional." Brandon waved his hand dismissively. "There are always workarounds if you know what you're doing." That statement sent a chill down my spine, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he just needed time to understand our industry's regulatory landscape. Within weeks of Brandon's arrival, I discovered concerning discrepancies in our overseas accounts. During routine verification of our Asia-Pacific transactions, I noticed unusual patterns in how certain losses were being recorded. The amounts were being fragmented and distributed across multiple accounts in ways that obscured their true magnitude. This wasn't just an accounting error. It appeared deliberate. I spent 3 days documenting the irregularities, creating a comprehensive file with transaction histories, compliance requirements, and potential consequences if left unaddressed. This was exactly the kind of issue that could trigger regulatory penalties, and with my knowledge of impending federal oversight, I knew it needed immediate attention. The same week I discovered these issues, our department received notification about an upcoming federal regulatory audit scheduled in 3 months. The timing couldn't have been more critical. As the compliance specialist, I would typically lead our preparation, ensuring all documentation was in order and training staff on proper interaction with federal auditors. I immediately began creating comprehensive preparation files, developing a timeline for internal reviews, and identifying high-risk areas that would require special attention. I stayed late every night for a week, methodically building our audit response strategy. This was my element, and despite my growing concerns about Brandon, I felt confident in my ability to navigate the upcoming inspection. The notification about the audit seemed to change Brandon's demeanor. I noticed him spending more time behind closed doors with his father, Jeffrey. Whenever I approached with questions about audit preparation, he would quickly change the subject or claim he had another meeting to attend. "We've handled audits before," he told me curtly when I pressed for a preparation meeting. "Just focus on your regular duties, and we'll deal with the audit when it gets closer." His casual attitude toward federal oversight was alarming, particularly given the discrepancies I'd already identified. But I continued my preparation, regardless, determined to protect both the company and my professional reputation. The stage was set for conflict, though I didn't fully recognize it yet. I believed that diligence and facts would ultimately prevail over politics and nepotism. I was about to learn just how naive that belief was in the corporate world, where connections often matter more than competence. The first major confrontation came when I formally presented my findings about the accounting discrepancies to Brandon. I'd prepared a detailed presentation with clear evidence of the irregularities and recommendations for correction. I expected concern, perhaps even appreciation, for catching potential compliance issues before they escalated. Instead, Brandon barely glanced at my documentation. "You're overreacting," he said, leaning back in his chair. "These are just standard accounting practices for international transactions. Standard practices don't involve fragmenting loss records to obscure their total amount," I countered, pointing to the specific transactions. "This pattern appears in over 30 instances, all in accounts overseen by your father." His face hardened at the mention of Jeffrey. "Are you accusing my father of financial manipulation? That's a serious allegation from someone in your position." The threat was thinly veiled, but I stood my ground. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm reporting factual discrepancies that need correction before the federal audit." Brandon dismissed me with a promise to look into it, but his expression made it clear my concerns would go nowhere. Walking back to my desk, I felt the first real sense that my professional integrity might soon clash with organizational politics. In the following weeks, Brandon's hostility became increasingly obvious. During team meetings, he would interrupt my presentations with unnecessary questions or dismissive comments. "Jaime seems to think we need to reinvent our entire process," he announced. During one particularly tense meeting after I suggested documentation improvements for audit compliance. The pattern continued in smaller ways. My emails went unanswered. My name disappeared from important meeting invitations. Projects I had previously led were reassigned without explanation. I confided in Sophia during lunch one day, sharing my concerns about the financial irregularities and Brandon's reaction. "You need to be careful," she warned, glancing around the cafe to ensure no one from our office was nearby. "Jeffrey has a lot of influence with the board. Brandon might be incompetent, but his father isn't. If they're hiding something, they won't hesitate to protect themselves." I tried speaking with Elaine, hoping my mentor could provide guidance, but she seemed distracted and unavailable. "The executive team is dealing with some sensitive situations right now," she told me vaguely. "I'm sure Brandon is just finding his management style. Give him time." Her dismissal hurt more than Brandon's hostility. I had always counted on Elaine's support, and her sudden distance left me feeling increasingly isolated. My suspicions deepened when I accidentally discovered Brandon altering financial documents. I had returned to the office after hours to complete some work, assuming the building would be empty. As I passed Brandon's office, I noticed his door ajar, the light from his computer illuminating his focused expression as he methodically adjusted figures in what appeared to be our quarterly compliance reports. I quietly retreated, my heart racing. This wasn't just incompetence. It was potentially deliberate fraud. The next day, I began documenting everything I could access without raising suspicion, making copies of original documents before they could be altered. A week later, I overheard a conversation between Brandon and Jeffrey while passing by a conference room they thought was empty. "This project represents the future of TechForge," developing truly innovative solutions through deep collaboration with visionary clients like Global Vision Industries. Edward concluded. I'd like to propose a toast to Richard Montgomery and the Global Vision team for their partnership, and to Aidan Montgomery for his technical brilliance that made this project a success. What about the discrepancies Jaime found? Brandon asked. She keeps pushing for corrections. The audit team will focus on the Singapore accounts first, Jeffrey was saying. We need to make sure everything there can withstand scrutiny. I froze in the hallway, the implications clear. They were deliberately concealing financial irregularities and saw me as a threat to their scheme. My suspicions had been correct, but confirmation brought no satisfaction, only fear and moral conflict. The situation reached a critical point when I received an official email notifying me that as the compliance specialist, I would be the primary contact leading the federal audit team through our records. This was standard procedure, and something I had done during previous inspections. Brandon's panic was evident when he learned of my assignment. He immediately called me into his office, his usual arrogance replaced with poorly concealed anxiety. I'll be taking point on the federal audit, he announced. You'll provide support, but all communication goes through me first. That contradicts the official notification, I replied calmly. The audit team specifically requested me based on previous interactions. The decision has been made, he snapped. Know your place in this organization, Jaime. The following day, my key accounts were suddenly reassigned to less experienced colleagues. Complex compliance files I had managed for years were distributed to team members who lacked the specialized knowledge to handle them properly. When I raised concerns about this disruption so close to an audit, Brandon accused me of not being a team player and resisting necessary organizational changes. My isolation grew as Brandon systematically excluded me from important meetings. Projects would be discussed and decisions made without my input, despite my expertise being directly relevant. I began receiving meeting summaries rather than invitations, effectively cutting me out of the decision-making process while maintaining the appearance of keeping me informed. Sophia pulled me aside after one such exclusion. They're building a case against you, she warned. Brandon has been asking everyone for examples of your performance issues. He seems determined to find or create problems. Have people been giving him what he wants? I asked, dreading the answer. Sophia's expression was grim. Taylor and Adam are playing along. They're afraid for their own positions. Others are staying neutral, but no one's defending you directly. The betrayal stung, but I understood the self-preservation instinct. Standing up against management, especially when nepotism was involved, rarely ended well for employees. Despite the growing pressure, I remained determined to protect my professional integrity. Each night I worked late, documenting the irregularities I found, copying evidence of the original transactions before they could be modified. I created a secure email account and sent myself encrypted files containing everything I discovered, building a comprehensive record of the apparent financial manipulation. One evening, as I was carefully photographing documents showing clear discrepancies between original and altered financial statements, I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly returned the papers to their folder and pretended to be working on routine analysis when Brandon appeared in the doorway. Working late again, he asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Just preparing for the audit, I replied with a calm I didn't feel. We're only 2 months away now. He studied my screen, which displayed an innocuous spreadsheet I'd quickly opened. Your dedication would be admirable if it were actually helping the company, he said before walking away. The message was clear. My days at Morgan Stanley Capital were numbered. The question was whether I could gather enough evidence of wrongdoing before they found a way to remove me. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few weeks. During a department-wide meeting, Brandon publicly criticized my work in front of 20 colleagues, claiming my obsessive focus on minor compliance details was hampering department efficiency. While some people get lost in paperwork, he announced, gesturing toward me, the rest of the team is actually moving our objectives forward. I maintained my composure, but the public humiliation burned. Worse was watching colleagues who had previously respected my expertise now avoiding eye contact, unwilling to be associated with someone clearly marked for removal. Only Sophia remained steadfast, catching up to me after the meeting. "That was completely unprofessional," she whispered. "Everyone knows your work is impeccable." "But no one will say it out loud," I replied, watching our coworkers hurry past without acknowledging us. Jeffrey began joining forces with Brandon, questioning my competence during leadership meetings I was still required to attend. "These compliance protocols Jaime insists on following seem excessive," he commented during one session. "Perhaps we need someone with a more practical approach to regulation." The message to others was clear. Aligning with me would be career suicide. One by one, colleagues found reasons not to collaborate with me on projects or invite me to meetings. Lunch invitations stopped. Conversations ended when I approached. In the span of weeks, I went from respected expert to departmental pariah. The isolation was painful, but worse was watching my professional accomplishments being dismantled. A successful regulatory project I had led for 6 months was presented to senior leadership with Brandon's name as project manager, my contribution reduced to a footnote. The methodologies I had developed for compliance tracking were rebranded as department innovations with no acknowledgement of their source. During this time, I discovered even more significant financial irregularities involving offshore accounts. Late one evening, while reviewing documentation, Brandon thought was inaccessible to me. I found evidence of systematic manipulation in how certain investment losses were recorded. The pattern suggested deliberate concealment of approximately $15 million in losses over the past year, all tied to funds overseen directly by Jeffrey. The discovery left me physically ill. This wasn't just creative accounting. It was potentially criminal financial misrepresentation. If the federal auditors discovered this scheme, the consequences would extend beyond Jeffrey and Brandon to potentially impact the entire company, threatening the livelihoods of hundreds of employees. I decided to confront Brandon one final time, hoping against hope that presenting the severity of the situation might break through his arrogance. I requested a private meeting and laid out the evidence as objectively as possible. "These discrepancies will be discovered during the federal audit," I explained. "The patterns are too consistent to be accidental. When the auditors find this, they won't just issue fines. This could trigger a criminal investigation." Brandon's face flushed with anger. "You've been digging into restricted files. That's grounds for immediate termination." "I've been doing my job as compliance officer," I corrected him. "These irregularities present serious legal and financial risks to the entire company." "The only risk to this company is your continued employment," he snapped. "This conversation is over." The next day, I received an email from Human Resources requesting my presence for an informal discussion about my performance. Sarah Wilson, the HR representative, was professionally cordial but clearly uncomfortable, as she informed me that concerns had been raised about my adaptation to new management directives and collaborative capabilities. "This isn't a formal warning," she clarified, "just a documented conversation about expectations going forward." The message was clear. They were building the paper trail necessary for termination. I remained outwardly professional while acknowledging their concerns, but inside, my anxiety was reaching a breaking point. The stress began taking a physical toll. Insomnia left me exhausted during the day. I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks as my appetite disappeared. Constant anxiety manifested as headaches and stomach problems that no amount of over-the-counter medication could address. Looking in the mirror each morning, I hardly recognized the pale, drawn face staring back at me. Despite my deteriorating health, I continued gathering evidence. I now had documented proof of Brandon and Jeffrey's manipulation of financial statements, including original documents and their altered versions with specific dates and times of modification. The pattern was undeniable once assembled chronologically, showing a systematic approach to concealing losses and inflating performance metrics. I contemplated whistleblowing but hesitated at the potential consequences. External whistleblowers often faced industry blacklisting regardless of the legitimacy of their claims. With 10 years invested in my career, the thought of starting over was terrifying. Yet watching illegal activity unfold while doing nothing violated every professional and personal principle I held. That evening, I called my sister Natalie, the only person I fully trusted with the situation. "They're going to fire me," I admitted after explaining the latest developments. "It's just a matter of time now." "Then make sure you're prepared," she advised pragmatically. "Document everything, save every email record, every conversation legally possible. If they're doing something illegal, protect yourself first." Her advice crystallized my approach. That night, I organized all my evidence into a comprehensive file, creating multiple backups on encrypted drives. I wrote a detailed timeline of events, including names, dates, and verbatim quotes whenever possible. If my career at Morgan Stanley Capital was ending, I would ensure I had protection against potential retaliation or defamation. The following morning, I received an email scheduling a performance review for the next day. The ominous subject line, "Urgent meeting regarding your position," left little doubt about its purpose. Despite anticipating this moment, seeing it formalized sent a wave of nausea through me. I spent that night meticulously preparing backing up files to secure locations and ensuring my personal items could be quickly collected from my desk. I rehearsed responses to potential accusations, determined to maintain dignity even in termination. Sleep eluded me entirely as I cycled through anger, fear, and finally a strange calm that comes with accepting the inevitable. As dawn broke, I dressed with particular care, choosing a conservative black suit that had always given me confidence during important presentations. Whatever happened, I would face it with professionalism intact, denying them the satisfaction of seeing me break. The termination meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, perfectly timed to allow me to clean out my desk after most colleagues had left for a company-sponsored happy hour. This careful orchestration was my first indication that management wanted my departure to attract minimal attention. Brandon was seated behind his desk when I arrived with Sarah from HR, positioned strategically in the corner, legal pad in hand. The room temperature seemed to drop as I closed the door behind me, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. "Please sit down." Jaime Brandon gestured to the chair opposite his desk, his expression coldly professional. I noticed a manila folder centered precisely on his desk, my name visible on the tab. The termination paperwork was already prepared, confirming this meeting wasn't about improvement opportunities. "I've called this meeting to discuss your continued employment with Morgan Stanley Capital." Brandon began, his voice carrying the rehearsed quality of someone who had practiced this speech. "Over the past several months, we've observed significant issues with your performance and adaptation to company directives." He opened the folder, revealing a document filled with bullet points. "You've consistently questioned management decisions, pursued investigations outside your assigned duties, and created a negative atmosphere within the department." Each accusation was carefully crafted to sound legitimate while distorting reality. My adherence to compliance protocols became inflexibility. My concerns about financial irregularities became making unfounded accusations. My isolation resulting from their exclusion became failure to collaborate effectively. Despite verbal coaching and our informal HR discussion, these behaviors have continued, Brandon continued. "Therefore, effective immediately, your employment with Morgan Stanley Capital is terminated." He slid the termination document across the desk. "We don't need incompetence dragging down the department when we're focused on growth and innovation." The word incompetence hung in the air between us, deliberately chosen to wound. 10 years of exemplary service, multiple performance awards, and consistent recognition for regulatory excellence, all dismissed with a single, demeaning label. I maintained perfect composure, my expression revealing nothing of the rage and devastation churning inside me. Years of presenting to intimidating federal auditors had taught me how to wear an impenetrable professional mask when necessary. "I understand," I said, simply not giving him the emotional reaction he clearly anticipated. Sarah looked distinctly uncomfortable, her eyes fixed on her notepad rather than meeting my gaze. She had reviewed my stellar performance records for years and knew this termination contradicted my documented history of excellence. "You'll need to return your company identification and equipment before leaving," she explained, her voice softer than Brandon's. I can assist you with collecting your personal items. I signed the termination acknowledgement without argument, recognizing that protesting would accomplish nothing in this moment. There would be time later to address the injustice through appropriate channels. Brandon seemed almost disappointed by my calm acceptance, perhaps having expected tears or pleading. Security will escort you to collect your belongings, he added. An unnecessary humiliation, typically reserved for employees terminated for misconduct. That won't be necessary, I replied evenly. I can gather my things without supervision. It's company policy, he insisted clearly, relishing this final exercise of power. I walked out with dignity, a security guard trailing awkwardly behind me as I emptied my desk of family photos, professional certifications, and the few personal items I'd accumulated over 6 years. Colleagues watched with a mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't the ones being escorted out. Sophia approached, despite the guard's presence. "This is wrong," she whispered, quickly embracing me. "Call me later." 20 minutes after entering Brandon's office, I walked out of Morgan Stanley Capital, carrying a cardboard box of possessions my career apparently finished. The security guard, visibly uncomfortable with his assignment, mumbled an apology as he escorted me to the elevator. "For what it's worth, everyone knows you're the best we have," he said quietly as the doors closed between us. The professional composure I had maintained crumbled the moment I reached my car. Alone in the parking garage, I finally released the emotions I'd suppressed during the termination, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. 10 years of dedication dismissed with calculated cruelty. A reputation built on excellence, now tarnished with an accusation of incompetence. My hands shook so badly I could barely drive home. Once there, I called Sophia, who had witnessed the entire humiliating exit. "They announced your departure 5 minutes after you left," she reported, her voice hushed, as if speaking from a bathroom stall. "Brandon just said you were no longer with the company, and that all your projects would be redistributed. But Jaime, something weird is happening now." Elaine and William were just seen rushing into Jeffrey's office. "They're shouting." Her information provided little comfort in that moment, but planted a seed of curiosity amid my despair. Why would the CFO and CEO be confronting the VP immediately after my termination? That evening, I spread all my evidence across my dining room table, reviewing months of documentation showing clear patterns of financial manipulation. The decision before me was monumental. Accept my unjust termination and move on, or fight back at potentially great personal cost. I thought about my younger self, the idealistic graduate who believed that excellence and integrity would always be rewarded in professional settings. I thought about all the other employees who might face similar injustice if Brandon and Jeffrey's behavior went unchallenged. I thought about the investors and clients who trusted Morgan Stanley Capital with their financial futures, unaware of the manipulation happening behind closed doors. My decision crystallized with surprising clarity. I would not allow my professional reputation to be destroyed to protect their fraudulent activities. More importantly, I would not remain silent about potential criminal behavior that could harm countless others. With hands that no longer trembled, I dialed the number for the Federal Financial Regulatory Authority I had saved weeks earlier as a contingency. The call was answered by Agent Gabriel Thompson, who listened without interruption as I outlined the situation in precise factual terms. "These are serious allegations, Miss Reynolds," he said when I finished. "Would you be willing to share your evidence with our investigation team?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I can send encrypted files immediately and make myself available for detailed interviews. Please understand that while whistleblower protections exist, this path often involves significant personal and professional challenges," he cautioned. "I understand the risks," I assured him, "but I can't remain silent about what I've discovered." After ending the call, I spent hours organizing and sending my evidence through the secure portal Agent Thompson provided. Each document told part of a larger story of systematic financial manipulation, building a compelling case that would be impossible to dismiss as mere accounting errors. As midnight approached, I finally allowed exhaustion to overcome me. Sleep came in fitful bursts, my dreams filled with confrontations and accusations. My career might be in ruins, but for the first time in months, my conscience was clear. Whatever came next, I had chosen integrity over self-preservation, and that knowledge provided a strange comfort amid the uncertainty. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake at 7:30 the following morning. Groggily reaching for it, I expected Sophia with company updates, or perhaps my sister checking on my emotional state. Instead, an unfamiliar female voice greeted me. "Miss Reynolds. This is Rebecca Taylor, Executive Assistant to William Carter. The CEO would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience today. Would 9 o'clock be possible?" Fully awake now, I sat up in bed, mind racing. "May I ask what this concerns?" "Mr. Carter did not provide details," Rebecca replied professionally. "He only emphasized the urgent nature of the request." I agreed to the meeting, my thoughts immediately turning to the federal authorities. Had they already contacted the company? Was this an attempt at damage control? After ending the call, I prepared, meticulously selecting another professional outfit and gathering copies of key evidence to bring with me. If this was an attempt to silence me with settlement offers or threats, I wanted to be fully prepared to protect myself. The journey back to the corporate headquarters felt surreal after yesterday's humiliating exit. The same building I had been escorted from in disgrace now awaited my return, this time at the CEO's personal request. The irony wasn't lost on me. Security seemed confused by my appearance at the front desk, checking their records multiple times before issuing me a visitor badge. "Miss Reynolds. To see Mr. Carter," the guard announced through his phone, his expression betraying surprise at the connection between a recently terminated employee and the rarely accessible CEO. A different security officer escorted me to the executive elevator, a part of the building I had rarely visited during my tenure. As we ascended to the 35th floor, my stomach tightened with anxiety and determination in equal measure. Whatever awaited me, I would face it with the same professionalism I had always brought to my work. The executive floor existed in stark contrast to the departmental offices below. Plush carpeting, muffled footsteps, original artwork adorned walls, and the reception area featured leather furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. Rebecca greeted me with professional courtesy, offering water or coffee while I waited. Through the glass walls of surrounding offices, I noticed unusual activity for early morning. Executives normally scheduled for meetings or calls were huddled in small groups, conversations appearing tense from their body language. Something significant was clearly unfolding beyond my termination. After a 10-minute wait that felt much longer, Rebecca escorted me to William Carter's corner office, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The CEO rose from behind an imposing desk as I entered, his expression inscrutable. "Miss Reynolds, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. "I apologize for the early hour." William Carter had always been something of a mythical figure to most employees. In 6 years, I had only seen him in person during annual company addresses or passing through lobbies with entourages of executives. Up close, he appeared older than his press photos, suggested the lines around his eyes and silver at his temples, speaking to the pressures of his position. "Of course, Mr. Carter," I replied, maintaining the professional demeanor that had been my armor throughout this ordeal. "May I ask why I've been called here?" He studied me briefly before responding. "I received some concerning information this morning about your departure from the company. I'd like to understand exactly what happened." His phrasing caught me off guard. As CEO, shouldn't he have authorized my termination? The confusion must have shown on my face because he continued. "I returned from an international trip late last night to find several urgent messages awaiting me. One was from the Federal Financial Regulatory Authority requesting confirmation that you would be their primary contact for the upcoming audit. Another was a termination report for a senior financial analyst with exceptional performance reviews." His expression hardened. "I'd like you to explain the discrepancy." The realization struck me like a physical blow. William Carter hadn't known about my termination. Brandon and Jeffrey had acted without executive approval, likely hoping to remove me before the audit could proceed. "I was terminated yesterday afternoon," I explained carefully. Brandon Reynolds informed me that my services were no longer required due to performance issues. I kept my tone neutral, watching for his reaction. Performance issues, Carter's eyebrows rose. Your file shows consistent excellence ratings for 6 years. You've led 3 successful federal audits and implemented compliance protocols that have become industry standards. He lifted a manila folder identical to the one Brandon had used during my termination. Yet suddenly, over the past 2 months, you've allegedly demonstrated incompetence and inability to adapt to management directives. This makes no sense. May I ask who authorized my termination? I ventured. That's precisely what I'm trying to determine, Carter replied, frustration evident in his voice. This morning, I asked Jeffrey why his primary compliance specialist had been dismissed 3 weeks before a federal audit. He seemed surprised I was concerned. The CEO's expression darkened. When I reviewed your personnel file and termination documentation, I found Brandon Reynolds' signature as the authorizing manager with Jeffrey's approval stamp. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Then I received a call from Agent Thompson at the regulatory authority. He informed me you had contacted them with concerns about potential financial irregularities. The moment hung between us, his implicit question clear. I had a choice: minimize the situation to protect my potential reinstatement, or stand firmly by my whistleblowing actions. Integrity had already cost me my job. I saw no reason to compromise it now. I discovered systematic manipulation of financial records, I stated clearly. After multiple attempts to address these issues internally were dismissed or suppressed, I felt ethically obligated to report my findings to the appropriate authorities. I expected anger or defensiveness, the typical corporate response to whistleblowing. Instead, Carter's expression reflected something closer to resignation. Show me, he said, simply clearing space on his desk. For the next hour, I methodically presented the evidence I had brought, explaining the patterns of manipulation, the timeline of discovery, and my unsuccessful attempts to address the issues through proper channels. Carter listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting specific documentation details. When I finished, he sat in silence for several moments, the gravity of the situation evident in his expression. If even half of what you've presented is accurate, we're facing potential criminal charges and significant regulatory penalties. The evidence is accurate, I affirmed. I verified every document and transaction history personally. Carter nodded, then pressed a button on his phone. Rebecca, please ask Elaine Parker to join us immediately. And locate Brandon Reynolds. I want him in my office within the hour. Turning back to me, his expression softened slightly. Miss Reynolds, I want to extend my personal apology for how you've been treated. Your termination was executed without proper authority and appears to have been motivated by efforts to conceal the very issues you were attempting to report. The validation after months of gaslighting and isolation nearly broke my composure, but I maintained my professional demeanor. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'd like to offer you immediate reinstatement to your position, he continued. The federal audit begins in 18 days. And frankly, we need your expertise now more than ever. The offer wasn't surprising, but I recognized the leverage I currently held. My response was measured, but firm. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Carter, but I would need certain conditions met before considering reinstatement. If he was surprised by my negotiating stance, he didn't show it. Go on. First, I would require complete removal of Brandon Reynolds from my reporting chain. I cannot work effectively under someone who deliberately undermined my professional responsibilities and reputation. Carter nodded. Given what I've learned today, that seems like a reasonable starting point. Second, I would need a formal written retraction of all performance complaints filed in the past 3 months, with acknowledgement that they were retaliatory in nature. Also reasonable. Third, I would require promotion to Director of Compliance, reporting directly to the executive team rather than through middle management. The position would need appropriate authority to investigate and address compliance concerns without interference. This request caused him to pause briefly before nodding. We can accommodate that structure. Finally, I would need written authorization to lead the audit response team with full access to all financial records and personnel necessary to ensure complete transparency with federal investigators. Carter's expression remained neutral, but I sensed his reluctance at this final condition. Complete transparency would likely reveal issues beyond those I had already discovered. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Your conditions are accepted, Miss Reynolds. I'll have legal prepare the necessary documentation today." Our conversation was interrupted by Elaine Parker's arrival. The CFO stopped short upon seeing me, her professional mask slipping momentarily to reveal surprise. "Jaime," she acknowledged cautiously. "I wasn't aware you would be here. Miss Parker, we need to discuss some concerning financial irregularities that Miss Reynolds has brought to my attention," Carter stated, gesturing for her to join us. "But first, I'd like to understand why our leading compliance specialist was terminated without executive approval 3 weeks before a federal audit." As the meeting continued, I remained outwardly calm while internally planning my strategic return. The corporate landscape had shifted dramatically in 24 hours. Yesterday, I had been escorted from the building in disgrace. Today, I was negotiating terms with the CEO. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time in months, I had allies in positions of power and leverage to effect real change. The following morning, I returned to Morgan Stanley Capital with a new title, expanded authority, and a determination to correct the wrongs I had discovered. The employee entrance security guard did a double take upon scanning my newly issued executive-level identification card. "Welcome back, Miss Reynolds," he said with a genuine smile. "That was the shortest termination I've ever seen." "Thank you, Frank," I replied, appreciating his warm reception when so many others had remained silent during my ordeal. As I walked through the familiar hallways toward my new office on the executive floor, I felt the weight of stares and whispers. News of my reinstatement and promotion had clearly spread quickly. Colleagues who had avoided eye contact yesterday now offered tentative smiles or looks of confusion. I acknowledged them professionally, but maintained focus on the significant work ahead. My new office, formerly occupied by a vice president who had suddenly taken leave according to building gossip, offered privacy and proximity to the executive team. I had barely settled in when Sophia appeared in my doorway, her expression a mixture of relief and amazement. "When they announced your new position this morning, Brandon looked like he might faint," she reported, closing the door behind her. "What happened?" "Yesterday. You were escorted out today. Your director of compliance." I provided a simplified version of events, careful not to reveal details about the ongoing investigation. Sophia shook her head in disbelief. "I knew you were good, but taking down the VP's son in 24 hours. That's legendary." "This isn't about taking anyone down," I corrected her. "It's about ensuring our company operates with integrity and transparency." Our conversation was interrupted by a company-wide email announcement of an emergency all-hands meeting at 11 o'clock. The unusual timing and mandatory attendance requirement suggested significant developments. The large conference center was filled to capacity when I arrived. William Carter stood at the podium, his expression grave as he waited for silence. Flanking him were members of the executive team, notably missing Jeffrey and Brandon Reynolds. As many of you have already noticed, there have been significant personnel changes effective immediately. Carter began once the room quieted. Jeffrey Reynolds and Brandon Reynolds have been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. Murmurs swept through the audience as employees processed this unexpected announcement. Jeffrey had been a powerful figure in the company for over 15 years. His sudden removal represented a seismic shift in the corporate hierarchy. Additionally, Carter continued, "I'm pleased to announce that Jaime Reynolds has been appointed Director of Compliance with expanded authority to ensure our adherence to all regulatory requirements. She will be leading our response to the upcoming federal audit, and I expect every department to provide her with full cooperation." All eyes turned toward me seated in the front row. The attention was uncomfortable but necessary for establishing my new authority. Carter continued with operational updates and reassurances about company stability. But the underlying message was clear. A significant investigation was underway, and cooperation was not optional. As the meeting concluded, I noticed Brandon entering through a side door, his expression thunderous as he caught sight of me. He approached rapidly, ignoring colleagues attempting to engage him. "Enjoying your little coup," he hissed, as he reached me, voice low enough that only I could hear. "This temporary victory will cost you everything when my father returns." I met his gaze steadily. "This isn't personal, Brandon. It's about professional integrity and legal compliance. I suggest you focus on cooperating with investigators rather than making threats." His face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, William Carter appeared beside us. "Brandon, I believe you have a meeting scheduled with internal audit in 5 minutes. I wouldn't recommend being late." Brandon retreated, but his venomous glare communicated that this confrontation was far from over. I had made powerful enemies, but for the first time in months, I also had the authority to address the problems I had discovered. That afternoon, I met with the federal audit team led by Agent Thompson. The conference room atmosphere was tense as I introduced myself in my new capacity. "I appreciate your cooperation," Ms. Reynolds-Thompson acknowledged. "Based on the documentation you provided, we've expanded our audit scope significantly. We'll need complete access to all financial records from the past 36 months, with particular focus on the Asia-Pacific and offshore accounts." "You'll have everything you need," I assured him. "I've assembled a team to ensure full transparency and compliance with your investigation." Over the next week, I methodically exposed all the irregularities I had documented, working closely with federal auditors to reconstruct the complete pattern of financial manipulation. The scheme was more extensive than even I had realized, involving multiple offshore entities and complex transaction chains designed to conceal losses and inflate performance metrics. During this process, we discovered Brandon and Jeffrey attempting to destroy evidence. IT security, now reporting directly to me for audit purposes, intercepted attempts to delete critical files from the company servers. Thanks to backup protocols I had implemented years earlier, all deleted documents were recoverable, adding attempted obstruction to their growing list of problems. An emergency board meeting was called as the scope of the financial manipulation became clear. I presented a comprehensive summary of findings supported by federal investigators who confirmed the potential legal and regulatory consequences. The pattern suggests approximately $22 million in concealed losses over the past 2 years, I explained to the stunned board members. The manipulation primarily involved fragmenting and redistributing losses across multiple subsidiary accounts to maintain the appearance of consistent profitability. The board's decision was unanimous and swift. Brandon and Jeffrey were officially terminated with full cooperation, pledged to all regulatory and potential criminal investigations. Their company accounts were immediately locked, and security was instructed to escort them from the premises if they attempted to enter. As news spread throughout the company, additional evidence began surfacing. Colleagues who had previously remained silent, fearing retaliation from Jeffrey, now came forward with information about other irregular practices they had observed. Sophia led this wave of revelations, providing documentation of pressure she had received to modify financial reports under Brandon's direction. "I should have spoken up sooner," she admitted, as we reviewed her evidence. "I was afraid of losing my job." "Many people were," I assured her. "The important thing is that we're correcting the problems now." The company's cooperation with federal authorities helped mitigate potential penalties, though significant fines were still expected. More importantly, the swift action prevented broader market implications that might have affected clients and investors had the manipulation continued. Media coverage was inevitable once the investigation became public. Financial news outlets reported on the internal whistleblower who exposed systematic fraud, though the company managed to keep my name out of press releases. Industry publications praised Morgan Stanley Capital's transparent response to internal compliance, concerns a carefully crafted narrative that acknowledged problems while emphasizing the company's commitment to rectifying them. Through it all, I maintained focus on leading the audit process properly. My team worked 16-hour days, ensuring every document request was fulfilled promptly and completely. By demonstrating exceptional cooperation, we began rebuilding trust with regulatory authorities and establishing new standards for transparency. The final scene of Brandon and Jeffrey's corporate downfall played out 2 weeks after my reinstatement. I was reviewing audit documentation when Sophia rushed into my office. "You might want to see this," she said breathlessly. "Security is escorting them out right now." From my executive floor window, I watched as Brandon and Jeffrey were led to their vehicles by security personnel, boxes of personal belongings in hand. Their expressions were visible even from a distance. Anger, humiliation, and defeat mingled as they experienced the same walk of shame they had orchestrated for me. I felt no satisfaction in witnessing their downfall, only relief that the company could now begin healing from the damage they had caused. My victory wasn't in their destruction, but in the restoration of integrity to a system they had corrupted. As they drove away for the final time, I turned back to the audit documents on my desk, focusing on rebuilding rather than retribution. 1 year later, Morgan Stanley Capital had transformed. Our compliance protocols became industry benchmarks, cited by regulatory authorities as examples of best practices. The federal investigation concluded with significant fines but no criminal charges against the company itself, thanks to our full cooperation and immediate corrective actions. My position as Executive Vice President of Compliance was made permanent with expanded responsibilities, including quarterly reporting directly to the board. William Carter publicly credited our department with saving the company from potential catastrophic regulatory consequences during the annual shareholder meeting. The professional vindication was satisfying, but the personal journey of healing proved more challenging. For months after the ordeal, I experienced symptoms similar to PTSD anxiety attacks, before important meetings insomnia when facing difficult decisions, and hypervigilance about potential threats to my position or authority. Therapy helped me process the trauma of workplace betrayal and isolation. My sister Natalie provided unwavering support during the darkest moments, reminding me that my worth was never defined by Brandon's malicious assessment or the temporary abandonment by colleagues. Gradually, I rebuilt trust with team members who had distanced themselves during my struggle. Some relationships never fully recovered. Taylor and Adam, who had actively supported Brandon's campaign against me, eventually left for other firms. Others, like Sophia, evolved into stronger professional partnerships founded on shared values of integrity and mutual support. The legal consequences for Brandon and Jeffrey unfolded slowly through the justice system. Both faced civil penalties, and Jeffrey eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges of financial misrepresentation, receiving probation and substantial fines rather than imprisonment. Brandon avoided legal consequences but found himself essentially unemployable in the financial sector, his reputation permanently tarnished by association. 6 months after the investigation concluded, Elaine sought me out for a private conversation. The former CFO, who had resigned during the scandal though never directly implicated, seemed to have aged years in months. "You saved this company," she acknowledged quietly. When I suspected what Jeffrey was doing, I convinced myself looking the other way was protecting hundreds of jobs. "I was wrong and I failed you as a mentor. That will always be my greatest professional regret." Her acknowledgement helped heal one of the deepest wounds, the betrayal by someone I had trusted and admired. "We all make choices based on the information and courage we have in the moment," I replied. "What matters is learning from those choices." Industry recognition came in unexpected forms. I was invited to speak at compliance conferences, consulted by other financial institutions, developing whistleblower protection protocols, and featured in a business school case study about ethical leadership under pressure. The professional reputation that Brandon had attempted to destroy was now stronger than ever, defined by proven integrity rather than just technical expertise. I began mentoring young professionals navigating their own ethical challenges in corporate environments. "Your integrity is the only thing that truly belongs to you in any workplace," I would tell them. "Protecting it may cost you temporarily, but compromising it will cost you permanently." This perspective represented my most transformative lesson from the ordeal. Standing for principles despite personal cost wasn't just morally right. It ultimately proved professionally advantageous in ways I couldn't have anticipated when making those difficult choices. The friendships that emerged from the crisis proved more authentic than many of my previous professional relationships. Sophia became my closest ally, our shared experience, creating a bond that extended beyond workplace collaboration. Other colleagues who had quietly supported me during my isolation now formed my core professional network, united by proven character rather than mere convenience. Looking back, I recognize that being fired was paradoxically the catalyst that transformed both my career and the company itself. Had Brandon not overreached in his attempt to silence me, the financial manipulation might have continued for years, eventually causing far greater damage to everyone involved. The experience taught me that our greatest challenges often reveal our greatest strengths. The same attention to detail that Brandon dismissed as obsessive proved essential in documenting the evidence that eventually exposed the fraud. The commitment to regulatory compliance he viewed as inflexible ultimately protected the company from more severe consequences. Most importantly, I learned that speaking truth to power requires courage but also strategy. Effectiveness matters as much as moral certainty when addressing systemic problems. My evidence-gathering, timing, and professional approach amplified my voice when it mattered most, allowing truth to prevail against seemingly insurmountable odds. Today, when I mentor others facing similar challenges, I emphasize that ethical courage isn't just about personal integrity, it's about creating environments where integrity is valued and rewarded. By standing firm when it would have been easier to remain silent, I helped transform a corporate culture that had lost its moral compass. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right seemed impossible? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real stories about navigating workplace challenges with integrity. Remember that sometimes our most difficult professional moments become our greatest opportunities for growth and positive impact. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to trust your moral compass, even when it leads through challenging territory.